There are so many different kinds of hives out there today. And if you're just starting out as a new beginner, or if you've been keeping bees for a while and you're starting to wonder which hives you want to experiment with or which hives you should start with, it's a quandary today. It really is confusing. Hey everybody, David Burns. Thanks for joining me today on my channel. We're going to talk about the different hives that are available to beekeepers and what are the pros and cons to these hives. I'm hoping that I can help you through my video today make better decisions, what's going to work for you as we head into spring and get ready to get into some hives. Maybe you're wanting to buy another type of hive, a different hive than you have traditionally used, or maybe you're just starting out brand new and you're so confused. Let's jump right into it today, and let's start with the most familiar hive today, and that's the hive of the Langstroth. Now, the Langstroth hive is a hive that is so familiar in the beekeeping community and even to those who aren't beekeeping at all. I mean, I can talk to people that find out that I'm a beekeeper and they're not beekeepers, but they'll say to me, oh, my buddy has some hives because when I drive down the road by his house, I see these little square white boxes. And so people, even that aren't into beekeeping, they kind of know that if they see a beehive, they know what it looks like. They're familiar with what they traditionally think of as a big square box out there with bees in it. Now, this is a box, this is a hive that was actually, we call it invented by Reverend Langstroth in the mid to late 1800s. But Reverend Langstroth is known as the father of the modern beehive, because before Langstroth, most beekeepers are keeping bees in what are called skeps. They're sort of like upside down baskets, woven baskets, and then they would keep their bees in there. They're kind of dome shaped, but at the end of the year, they would have to really destroy it, crush it, get the honey out and start all over again. So Reverend Langstroth was trying to create a hive where he could actually inspect his hives by moving the frames in and out without breaking them and destroying the hive. And he came upon the Langstroth hive, and it's a hive that we all use today for the most part, up until about 5 or 10 years ago, and then it really started changing. But let's start with talking about the modern day beehive thanks to Langstroth. He actually was able to nail down what we call bee space. It's a space in the hive that the bees respect. They leave it there so they can walk through it. In other words, bees need a path to go between their comb and around different sections of frames in their hives and all. They need a pathway. And it turns out to be about 3/8 to 1/4 of an inch that bees need to pass. So they walk these tight little spaces and do their work. Now, if it's larger than 3/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, larger than bee space, they feel that it's too large and they will add more comb to it to actually get it to the size that they need it. They will take advantage, in other words, of all the space that they need by putting comb so they can put resources, they can raise brood on the comb. So they're going to utilize most of the space in a box, in a hive. Now, if it's too small of an area to build comb, but too small for them also to walk through, then they will what we call propolis it. They will take propolis, they gather it from plants and trees. It's a sticky substance. I made a video about the health benefits to the beehive with propolis. They will actually take it and they will propolize, they will kind of glue things together that if the spacing is too large. And so when we talk about a Langstroth, as you can see in the picture here, a Langstroth hive can be a 5-frame hive. We call that a nuke. And then it can be an 8-frame hive, which is usually about 13 3/4 inches wide. And then we have the full-blown 10-frame Langstroth hive. Now, the full-blown Langstroth is about 16 1/4 inches wide, 19 7/8 long. So you can see that it starts out being the 10-frame, which is going to be 16 1/4, or you can have an 8-frame width-wise. That box is going to be about 13 3/4, down to a 9-inch 5-frame box. And so all of those still follow the Langstroth design. And you can see in this picture that maybe the two in the middle could be 8-frame or it could be just a distorted image. And so this is a frame that Langstroth invented that is actually stacked vertically. So boxes are stacked one on top of the other. They're just stacked vertically. Now, the cons about a Langstroth hive is that they're stacked vertically, which means, ow, my back hurts because these boxes weigh 50 to 70 pounds and I'm having to pick them up. Also, notice in the picture here that the person on the left is actually, since the hive is on a stand, you can see there's two deeps and the person already has their arms, their hands level with their shoulder. That's what it appears in the picture. And that means that they put a super on top of that and another honey super and maybe 3 honey supers. There's no way they can look in the hive and inspect it. It's a little bit of a disadvantage in that the boxes are stacked vertically. It's a disadvantage for the beekeeper, not a disadvantage to the bees because the bees don't care. But the beekeeper is going to have to use a step ladder or be very wise and actually start lower to the ground. So by the time you get 2 deeps and some supers on there, then you're going to be able to manage the hive by not having to stretch and look inside of it or try to lift boxes up at a very awkward angle. So another con is that they're tall and that they're heavy, and that makes them more labor intense. Now, most beekeepers have dealt with this for forever, and so we just know that's part of the territory. But when you start getting older and you start realizing a honey super weighs upwards of 50 pounds or more, and you're taking it off in an awkward position, then stacking those vertical hives, meaning every time you inspect, if you have 2 supers on top of 2 deeps and you got to go look for your queen, you got to remove a 50-pound box of super, a 50-pound another super off, then you got to remove a deep box sometimes to get all the way down to the bottom deep. So if there's any disadvantage, I would say the stacking of the boxes vertically and the weight that it just requires is pretty labor intense. Now let me talk about the pros. The pros are that most of the research and the studies that are done on bees are usually done in Langstroths. Not always, but I would say the majority of them. When I read research papers, when I see videos or pictures of research being done, Langstroth hive, I see that. It has a level of treatment clarity, and what I mean by that is when you go to treat for mites, you can read the label, which is what you're supposed to do, of the chemical, of the treatment, and it will say, it would refer to the treatment based on a Langstroth configuration. It might say, put a strip between the 2 brood boxes, or put a strip, between the brood frames. And since they did their study on the treatments in a Langstroth hive, they are wanting you to put the treatments in a Langstroth hive. So if you have another type of hive, we'll get into that, but then you may not know how to treat your hive. So treatment clarity is pretty easy. The Langstroth hive is extremely compatible between the Langstroth hives. The dimensions, whether you buy a hive from this company, that company, if you buy a Langstroth hive, they're going to be pretty much compatible. Now you might get some off brands, or I don't know how to say it, but you might get some companies that aren't well established and they're just selling things. Maybe you'll find them online or Amazon or something. And it might be even from a different country. If you live in the US, you may not have the exact measurements when you get that hive, even though it looks like a Langstroth hive. It could be off. And I find that to be pretty common from people that call me up and say, this box that I bought doesn't fit the box below it. Why is that? So, but traditionally, like here in the US, you're going to find everybody following the 16 1/4, 19 7/8 hive configuration on a 10 frame hive. It's going to be pretty compatible. Not only the hives are compatible, but if you grab a queen excluder, it's going to fit on a Langstroth hive, no matter where you get the queen excluder, no matter what company you buy it from. It's going to be just this compatibility of feeders, of different types of equipment that you're going to use. It's going to be compatible. You don't have to worry about that much. Now, the Langstroth hive is very simple. It's very easy. I think most beginners are going to find the Langstroth has a lot less moving parts, a lot less things to kind of figure out what you do to it and when you do it, because it's a box with frames in it. As simple as that. There's very little to a Langstroth hive. That, I believe, makes it very easy for a beginner to start with, because it doesn't have a lot of extra things that you have to manipulate. Another thing to consider is this is what you're going to find that most mentors are familiar with. And that means if you're finding somebody in your club that's going to help you out, that means they have experience in beekeeping. So they're going to have 10, 20, 30 years of experience in beekeeping, and a lot of the modern hives that we're going to talk about in just a minute, they weren't around when your mentor was getting started in beekeeping and getting his or her experience. That means that if you buy and get started with a hive that's not a Langstroth, your mentor may not be familiar with your hive. They can tell you about bees, management, and skill sets of managing bees, but when it comes to managing a hive that is kind of brand new on the market, and maybe they're not going to be real clear on how to manipulate it at the right time. So that can be a problem too, but it's a good thing, again, because your mentor is going to be somebody with a lot of years of experience, and they got their foundation, I'm sure of it, in most cases, majority of the time, in a Langstroth hive. It is one of the most popular hives, as we talked about earlier. People see them going down the road. If you watch a TV show, you see a beehive, it's a Langstroth hive. So it's going to be really familiar to people in your bee club. If you go and ask questions, I have a question about my hive. Do I need to put a queen excluder on or something? Everybody's thinking in terms of Langstroth. So, I don't want to say like everybody, because I know you're going to leave a comment and you're going to say, but I have a flow hive. We're going to talk about that. The flow hive is a Langstroth. It just has a different way of harvesting honey. But you might say, I use a top bar, or I have a Lands hive, or I have a horizontal hive. Going to get to that, so hold your horses. Come with me now on the whole video. We'll get to all those. But I would say the majority of the time, it is the most common hive right now is the Langstroth hive. Now, as I said earlier, it's easier to ask somebody, when you have a question about your Langstroth, it's going to be easier for you to ask somebody because they have experience manipulating that Langstroth hive. So those are some of the pros. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, the next hive I want to talk about is the top bar hive. Now, before we get into the next hive and talk about another hive, I want to open up this. Oh, here it is over here. This is amazing. I took a peek and I wanted to show it to you guys. It is from Carol Livingston and her husband, and I appreciate you guys so much. Got to see them at the Honeybee Expo. They made Bobblehead David a pair of sunglasses. I have an issue with my camera sometimes focusing on his eyes and not mine, and I said, he needs a pair of sunglasses. So they made Bobblehead David. Well, they put a little ball in there to keep him from getting crushed. Wow, it's going to be close in size. Look at that. A little tiny pair of sunglasses. Will it work? Oh my gosh, I think it's going to. Wow. Bobblehead David is in style now. Look at that, man. That guy is styling. Well, please subscribe. That's Bobblehead David's job. Bobblehead David's job is to help you guys be encouraged to subscribe to my channel. Let's get back to the next hive. Now, the top bar hive is a simple word. It means the top bar only. So it is a hive, kind of a cool hive. And for a long time, they were really gaining some momentum here in the US, maybe 10 years ago, as I remember. In fact, our bee company, when we were manufacturing hives, we actually were making top bar hives too. And we thought the market was going to go that direction, but it didn't seem to go that way at all. Now, I know there are top bar followers, a community of top bar people, and I respect and love the top bar community. I think they're enjoying their top bars. There are companies that make top bars. There are specialty companies that focus just on top bar hives, and they are doing a great job. But they're not as common. They are just not as common because of things like treatment complexity. Sometimes if you're going to treat your hive for mites and you read the label, it says put between two deeps or two brood boxes. Well, on a top bar hive, you don't have that. You have a single horizontal hive going this way. It's horizontal. And so it's just the bars with the comb attached, as you can see in the picture. I'm holding one up here that I ran many years ago. And so you don't know really how to treat it. And some of the companies really don't know what to recommend to you on placing treatments in. However, I will say top bar people, beekeepers, have been able to adapt it. They have been able to think it through and decide, okay, if I'm going to use Formic Pro, this is how I'm going to use it in my top bar, so on. Many times top bar beekeepers sometimes lean more toward being more natural. So they may not be so apt to use treatments to control mites. They might use another method. Handling frames is a little challenging. So let's pretend that I have a top bar attached to this comb. I don't, but it's a wooden top bar, and the bees build their comb on the top bar. When you pull it up out of your hive like this, you can't take it and do it like this, like you would a regular Langstroth frame, because it's only attached at the top bar. So by holding the bar and tilting it, the weight of the comb will cause it to break away from the top bar. So the proper way to do it is to pick it up like this and look at this side. And if you want to look at this side over here, you take it, you keep everything like this, keep the weight like that. Now you can spin it over here and look at it. So that's kind of something you have to get used to in handling a top bar frame. Also, you might find that your mentors might be unfamiliar with the top bar hive. They may be familiar with the Langstroth, so they may not know the frame handling techniques. They may not know how to mentor you on treating for mites in a top bar hive, or putting a queen excluder, or making a split, or installing nucleus when you have to move 5 frames of a nuke that you bought that are Langstroth frames and you're trying to get them into a top bar hive. Your mentor may not know how to do that. It's just those kind of things are challenging when there's not a commonality of parts and pieces that go together in a top bar from a Langstroth hive. Also, let's talk about overwintering. Now, I have tried to overwinter top bar hives and I have not been successful with it. Never have been. I've tried taking them off the legs, lowering them on the ground, using blankets, using insulation in the top bar, I guess the roof, on the inside of the roof of the top bar. I've tried feeding them. I've tried every technique that I can successfully do on a Langstroth. And I'm not going to blame this on a top bar. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm blaming it on myself that I just don't have the skill set yet to figure out how to implement what I'm successful with in a Langstroth and make that compatible over to a top bar hive where I live. I live in a very cold area, prairie lands of Illinois. It's windy, it's cold, it's just rough. And so bees move naturally in structures. Like when I take bees out of houses and buildings, the comb is built this way. It goes up and down between the walls, between the studs. And as it gets colder, they move upward into the heat and to the stored honey, much like a Langstroth. But in a top bar hive that now is horizontal, the bees can't move because of the frame right there. That cluster can go up and down between the frames and remain a tight cluster. But moving sideways, they have to get completely out of that frame and go below, because the top is sealed off. They can't go that way. So they have to go below it. So movement, I think that's one of my problems. My bees just don't move very well sideways in the wintertime like they do in a more vertical box on top of box arrangement in a Langstroth hive. So that's a challenge. So don't jump into it thinking that you can just carry over your same skill sets from a Langstroth to a top bar. There's going to have to be a learning curve and some time where you experience this. You'll just have to talk to top bar people on what they're doing to overcome these difficulties. I just haven't invested the time in it. I tried it for a while. It didn't work for me. It didn't really suit my operation, but I did want to get the experience in doing it. Yeah, so I kind of speak to you today. Also, keep in mind that on a top bar hive, it may be more difficult to harvest the honey from the frames because the frames only have a top bar. They don't have the side bars or the bottom bars to the comb. So the comb is only hanging from the top bar. That means when you go to extract it, like an extractor, you're going to have to modify, create, be creative, and maybe place it in a basket. That's what I did. I would cut my honeycombs off. I would make a kind of weld together a smaller basket that would hold my comb inside my larger basket. You can make these little changes, or you can crush and squeeze the comb and just let the honey drain out. It's just a little more cumbersome for me on a top bar hive than a Langstroth hive that I'm familiar with. Also, you may find there be very few people in your bee club that can give you advice on how to manage your top bar hive. because they're not as familiar with it. And so those are some of the cons of a top bar hive. Now, what are the pros to a top bar hive? Well, here's the whole reason that top bar hives really did, I guess, kind of stand out as almost a poster child hive of the more natural part of beekeeping. And that's because you can just throw pieces of wood together that you find back behind the shed. There's no standard measurement. You can actually build your own top bar hive by putting a V-shaped pieces of wood together and then making a lid for it and then cutting some strips across it and let the bees just build onto those strips. So it's kind of a do-it-yourself operation. And so a lot of people feel that I just want to be kind of a natural beekeeper. I want to get some wood from the shed out there, nail it together. I'll just saw some strips to be my top bars. I may put little pieces of wood in there to help them get started on some frames, drawing some comb down. I may cut some plastic frames and cut a kerf in my top bars and insert a little bit of strips of foundation in there to get them started. But there's all across the board, whatever you want to do, it's kind of a do-it-yourself easy. It's supposed to be easy to do. No specific measurement. There's just no uniformity on it. Now, we do want an angle to it, and that angle kind of is important because you don't want it, you want to be at an angle, and that's what the bees are going to build. Now, sometimes in my case, they were connecting a little bit of the angled comb on the edge near the walls with some connective comb. So when I went to pull it up, it was connected. So I just took a long, like a bread knife, and I would just kind of cut off these little parts and pieces that were where the comb was attached to the wall. It wasn't that bad. Once I cut it, they never reattached it. So I was able to keep inspecting it, moving it in and out. But you'll have to watch for that. They may attach it to your side walls, so be careful about that. But that's a benefit. No specific measurements. It's very easy on your back because, again, unlike the Langstroth, you're not lifting heavy boxes and heavy boxes off to get to a box. You're just taking the lid off, which in my case it was heavy, but you take the lid off, it was heavy and awkward. And then you start lifting one frame at a time up. So it's easy on the back, no heavy lifting. And some claim that they have less mites. Now, I'm not going to say that there's not some, I guess, wiggle room where there could be a potential for less mites on a top bar hive, but studies have been done, and this study, I'm not going to go too deep on this, but studies have been done on the top bar hive. Some of the people want it to be regressed bees. That means bees that are just smaller. They have smaller size cell. The bees themselves are smaller. It's a process. You just can't overnight get you can buy a regressed package, but it takes time to get your bees to be regressed or smaller and keep them that way. Some studies have revealed and shown that the smaller cell size makes no difference at all. But the two camps argue about the studies, and they say the studies weren't done correctly, that smaller size cells do prevent mites from expanding so quickly. So I'm kind of like on the fence on this one. It's not enough. In my situation, I had as many mites in my top bars as I did my Langstroth. I did not see a reduction. I was not using regressed bees. I was just using normal size. I would let the bees build their own size cells. And since my bees weren't regressed, that means they were building cells 5 millimeters, an average size, whatever that is. And so, that might be something you want to study and look into yourself. And now we have the Layens hive. Now, a Layens hive is interesting. It's kind of like the collaboration or the fusing together of a top bar hive and a Langstroth hive because they have similarities. A Layens hive is a horizontal hive. It's different than a horizontal Langstroth, but it is a horizontal Layens. They're very popular in Europe, like in Spain. I would say it's one of the most average hives that you see, like in Spain. But some of the cons, well, let me back up and say that you can see here in the image, it's different than a top bar hive in that it has a frame that's similar to a Langstroth. Top bar, yes, but Langhans Hive has the side bars and the bottom board on the frame, the bottom frame board. And so it looks like a Langstroth frame in its design, but the measurements are different. A Langstroth deep hive is, I think it's 19 inches, approximately 19 inches this way, and 9 1/8, 9 and something down, where you're going to see this one to be 13 by 16. So it's 13 this way from side to side in the hive, and then it's going to be 16 inches down. So it's a different size frame altogether. It's not going to be compatible with a top bar. It's not going to be compatible with the Langstroth, and it may not be compatible with some land hives. They might be built slightly different, but traditionally 13 by 16 is going to be that compatibility of that Langhans hive. But again, they're not going to be, you're not going to be able to swap frames with another hive that you have that's a Langstroth. You got to go one way, like all Langhans or not, if you want to swap frames. Again, your mentors may not be familiar with how to manipulate a Langhans hive, especially like installing a package. You're going to have to put a divider wall in there, a stopping point for that package to get rolling, and then keep moving that wall further back. It has a technique to it that is unique that people may not be familiar with it. So if you found a great mentor in your club and they're going to help you this spring, and you're going to run a Langhans hive, as soon as you say I have a Langhans hive, they'll try to help you, but they may have to do their homework to get caught up to speed on how to run and the differences of a Langhans hive. Just because they're similar to a top bar hive means that they're going to be challenging to overwinter. They are up on legs, so they're mounted up in the air more. If you live in a very cold climate, they're going to be just having a lot of wind hitting them. So that's going to be a challenge in overwintering them. The other thing that you're going to have to deal with is maybe there are very few people in your club that can help you answer questions that you're having about your Langhans hive. They're catching on, don't get me wrong, they are really catching on in the US. But it's taken a while for all of this to be caught up as beekeepers so that people with experience in a Langhans hive can help you out. And again, because they are all in this horizontal configuration, and all the frames, however many there are, 10, 20, 30 frames like this, it's going to mean that they're going to be treatment. It's going to be kind of, you're going to scratch your head. How do I treat this? We're back to, where do I put this strip of treatment, because it's supposed to go between two deep boxes. I don't have two deep boxes. So you do have to kind of struggle with that. Now, what are the pros to a Langhans hive? Well, similar to the top bar hive, there's no heavy lifting. They're very, all just horizontal frames right in front of you. I did want to mention one more con though. I forgot to say they're very expensive to ship. One company here in the US, they have on their website that it costs $499 just to ship a Langhans hive. That's $500 to ship a Langhans hive. So you're going to have to contend with, it's a big assembled heavy box coming on a pallet in the semi-truck. Maybe some companies sell them unassembled. I don't know, but I was just looking to prepare this. Now the pros are, there's no heavy lifting because you're lifting frames out. You're not moving boxes around. That's pretty cool. There's no additional boxes that you have to buy. You don't have to buy another super. You don't have to buy, pieces and parts. It's all just right there already contained. Kind of an advantage too. It uses the full frames rather than just a top bar, so you can inspect it like you do a traditional Langstroth. You can tilt it and it's not going to fall off like a top bar would. There's less disturbance, like a top bar, there's less disturbance when you're inspecting. You're not taking off a box and putting a bunch of bees over there while you're working on a bunch of bees here in a Langstroth. Instead, you're pulling one frame out at a time, so you're disturbing your bees a lot less. And like I said earlier, they're more common in Europe, but they are catching on here in the US. Now let's talk about a horizontal Langstroth. Horizontal hives, I got one this year, or last summer, started running it, kind of got a late start on it, but I started on it. And they use regular Langstroth hives. They're kind of fun that way. You can interchange your Langstroth with other hives if you need to build up one or swap frames around. It's all in one horizontal box, kind of nifty. No heavy lifting is a big plus here. Back saver for sure. There's less disturbance when you're inspecting it. Now the cons are on a horizontal Langstroth is they're difficult to overwinter. I'm sorry to say mine did not make it through winter. They were doing really good until we had that blast of several days of 30 below zero Fahrenheit. And unfortunately, I got behind the 8 ball and dropped the ball on getting my feeding boards, spending time to get my feeder boards configured to fit on there. I was hoping they had enough on board. They did. They left a lot of honey. But again, my theory is where I live, it's so cold, the cluster can't move sideways through a frame like they can on the vertical hives. They can move up between the frames. So I did lose it this winter. I have yet to overwinter a horizontal hive. Now, in fairness, I haven't taken the time to invest in learning how to do that. That's just not something that I have taken the time yet to do. There are people that are running top bars and horizontal hives that further north than me that are having success overwintering them. I just haven't taken the time to learn to apply what I can do on a Langstroth over to this just yet. I'm going to work on it. I'll get there. I'm just transparent. I haven't taken the time needed to do that yet. I was hoping they'd make it on their own, but they didn't. It's extremely heavy when it's full. You're not going to move this at all. It is a giant. And like I said, it's very expensive to ship because mine came assembled and it's not cheap to ship a big heavy box on a semi-truck. And again, we're back to being challenging when we are starting to treat them. Now, let's kind of land the plane about this talk about what hive do we decide. Now, I could have talked more about these other hives. You see, there's the new Keeper's Hive that's probably going to come out this year. There's the Apime Hive. I love Korhan. He's a great guy at Apime. And they have similar traits to a Langstroth. They are a Langstroth. They're just built out of plastic with insulation in the wall. A Keeper's Hive, Langstroth. It's Langstroth just assembled and kind of a little different. It involves an 8-frame Langstroth on the bottom, 5-frame Langstroth techniques going upward. So we're still doing Langstroths, just a little different configuration. Even the Flow Hive Langstroth. It may be a little bit different in the measurements, exact measurements, but it's a Langstroth hive with a patented way to make it easier to harvest the honey by turning a crank. But all the other things are just as familiar to a Langstroth. So when it comes to these new types of hives, we have to consider these things. When you're thinking about the hive that you want to use this year, how easy is it going to be for you to purchase it? Are you going to have to order it from overseas? Are you going to have to order it from a company that you're not familiar with? Is it going to be a lot of shipping costs? How easy it is for that hive to be purchased? What about assembly? Does it come assembled already? Do you have to work at assembling it? Are you good at that? Is it suitable for your climate? Like I'm struggling with the horizontal thing in my climate, whether top bar or horizontal lane. So Langstroths, traditional Langstroths are very suitable for my climate. And what about the budget? Does it fit your budget? Obviously, we all know the Flow Hive is more money than a Langstroth. So you're going to have to just weigh your budget out. And then you got to think about customer service. You can find cheaper hives like on Amazon, but your customer service may be more challenging than if you buy them from a very reputable company that's been around for a long time that specializes in making hives for customers. And then what about physical limitations? Your physical restrictions like back pain, knee pain, can't lift that much weight. Consider those things. And can you still add the needed extra parts and pieces to it? Or is it compatible or not compatible to all the feeders and things that you want to try? And will your mentor have the experience to help you with your new hive? And finally, I want to talk about you got to ask this question: where and how do I purchase a hive? Obviously, you can purchase them from large beekeeping companies that sell hives and have sold hives for many years. But rising up rapidly are a lot of small mom and pop operations. And these are just really taking over the beekeeping market. And I'm surprised they haven't really started to put the pinch on the 3 or 4 large beekeeping companies that are out there and have been out there a long time. Because everywhere you turn, I mean, where I live, there are large mom and pop beekeeping companies selling beehives that weren't there 5 years ago. It's amazing. Even farm and fleets or farm stores, a lot of your, I guess your stores that are might be selling farm equipment around you that are now selling hive equipment. So you'll see that a lot as well. You also have to consider, can I build my own? Some of you may be carpenters and you can consider building your own hives. You might want to consider how much does it cost to ship your hives to you. A lot of companies offer free shipping over $150. Think about that. Think about installing your bees. If you buy a 5-frame nuke that your bees are on the frames, how do you get the nucleus frames in like a top bar hive? That's not compatible. How are you going to do that? You're going to have to go with a package only. Those kind of things you're going to have to weigh out. You're also going to have to consider Amazon is a good source, I think, for beekeepers to kind of look at the variances. A lot of beekeepers, let me back up, a lot of beekeeping companies in the US do have their products, maybe under different names, on Amazon. But again, consider if you're going to get the customer support that you need when you start beekeeping. Check reviews in that case, check comments that people are leaving, kind of get some feedback, and do consider customer support is huge. It really is huge. Also, you want to look at the kind of like the imported lookalikes on some of these hives that you might say, I'm going to say, well, bundle. To be honest with you, I've heard people tell me that they can buy a lookalike flow hive for just fraction of the cost. But they've also told me it didn't go well. And so there were differences, there were awkwardness of sizes, incompatibility. It was just wasn't right. So they struggled with it, even though they saved a ton of money. So do consider those things as well. And finally, what you have to do is consider, will the person that is my mentor, what do they use? Because I'm probably going to benefit from using the same hive as my mentor does, at least for the first few years, so that I can glean all of their knowledge and apply it to my hive, just like they are applying it to their hive. We can compare notes that way. So these are some fun things to think about. My personal opinion is that if you're brand new to beekeeping, I really think you should start with what's simple, easy, true, tried and true, and that's a Langstroth hive. Doesn't mean you can't try a different hive. By all means, if you're just bent on starting with a hive that's not as common as the Langstroth, go for it. But I've already told you what you're going to be up against, but I think you could probably navigate through it. It's just going to take a little bit more time and energy. But I prefer to wait and try the other hives after you have gotten a lot of experience with bees, and knowing how to manage your bees is everything. In fact, what keeps beekeepers from being successful sometimes is that new beekeepers often chase fads, such as a new hive. Hey, did you hear about the new hive? It's supposed to be better, and your bees aren't supposed to have as many of this, and and so all at once you think, I'm going to do that because that way my bees will live. No, it's not. It doesn't work that way. The actual hive plays a very small role in how successful your bees maybe overwinter or deal with mites. That really involves you as a beekeeper to have your knowledge and your skill sets so that you can apply what you know to help your bees stay healthy. And then you need to learn bee biology. A hive isn't going to save your bees, but you being the beekeeper with a great vast array of knowledge from taking good classes online or something, and you understand bee biology and how to manage your bees in the hive that you have them in, that's how you're going to be successful. I just made a new video about opening up my hive a little bit on a warmer day this winter. Found some moisture on the bottom. I want to show you what happened and what I think about that. Watch this video right here, guys. I'll see you over there.